Welcome back to the Third Wheel Podcast at Night. I'm Caleb, and I'm joined once again by our special guest, Toomy.
Hello.
All right. Part 2, Quiet on Set. Talking about episodes 3 and 4. Yeah. Shh. That should go on the soundboard, too. All right. So let me see. All right. Episode 3. Talked about Dan Schneider. Talked about how people aren't happy when churches abuse children, but they're okay and willing to forgive Hollywood. Don't get that. Episode 3. Let's get right into it. Drake Bell. He sits down. I challenged him in that one episode where we talked about him to tell his side of the story. And he actually decides, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and give him my 2 cents on it. So, how'd you feel when that episode started? Were you like ready? Were you excited to hear his part of the story? Were you like,
This is like, this is the meat. This is like why we're here.
Pretty much. And they knew that, so they saved it for episode 3. But, yeah. So, pretty heavy hitting stuff. Drake Bell sits down and he's like sighing and he's ready to talk. He's got his hair done. He starts talking about Drake and Josh. Now, the first thing when I heard Brian Peck was the one that was abusing him, I was kind of curious and I was like, is that Josh Peck's dad? Did you think that at one point?
At first, when this first came out.
Right. So I was like, oh, and I looked at it and I was like, no, not that interesting of a story. Yeah, good story, but not as interesting as that. Drake Bell sits down. He starts telling his side of the story. So they start off with his dad, and his dad had a big custody case with Drake's mom, right? So they're arguing about normal divorce stuff. So his dad has a problem with Brian Peck right out the gate. He's like, I don't like this guy. He's weird. He's creepy. I don't know if he's saying that now in hindsight. And he's like, I wonder if he's exaggerating a bit on how much he called out Brian Peck. Right. But, what we need to take a story as fact, for now. And Drake says, like, yeah, he tried to keep me away from Brian. He was never comfortable with him, that type of stuff. But it got to the point where Drake started feeling resentment toward his dad, and Brian Peck and Drake's mom were like, hey, your dad's holding you back. You're trying to do all this stuff for Nickelodeon, and he's keeping you from doing what you're trying to do. Well, Drake ends up believing Brian and his mom. And so they find a way to cut Drake's dad out of his life, right? So that's episode 3. They lay that down. And so his dad's like, fine, I'll stay out of Drake's life, but you have to promise me you will not leave him alone with Brian Peck, right? And Drake's mom, and I was getting the vibes that it wasn't so much... Drake likes to defend his mom and say, like, well, Brian Peck had the wool over everybody's eyes. But I'm wondering how much of it was, like, she let Brian Peck hang out with Drake and have him alone out of spite for her ex-husband. And I was sitting here thinking, like, that, she wants to be a strong, independent woman, and I support that in most scenarios, sure. But I'm like, how much of this is, like, yeah, oh my gosh. It's like she just did the opposite of what Drake's dad wanted. And I was like, how much of that is her being petty and the divorce? And how much of that is like, oh, I actually think Brian's safe, or how much of it is like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't like him. That's why I divorced him. So Brian gets to spend all the time with Drake that he wants. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Did you get those vibes at all or no? They don't talk to Drake's mom, but.
No, yeah, she's not on the show. So it's hard for me to think that because we don't get her side of the story at all.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, it's entirely possible.
Right.
Like we're human. She's human.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, I think it could be a combination of both as well. Because Brian really worked hard to do that.
Yeah.
To lay that foundation. Like, hey, I'm the cool guy.
Yeah. So the whole episode, Drake's sitting there and he starts talking about how Brian Peck was able to talk Drake's mom into letting him go to his house to work with him or script reading, voice coaching, whatever by himself. And that first time Drake's sleeping, he says he was sleeping and he woke up and Brian Peck was assaulting him. That's kind of really all the details we get, which are understandable. Like, I wouldn't want to talk about in detail all the stuff that Brian Peck's doing to me as a kid, right? Wouldn't want to talk about that. But he says he wakes up and he was assaulting me. That's how he puts it. And then this was interesting to me. He describes the first time that it happens very vividly. And he's like, he was so apologetic. And he said, like, I'm sorry, and like it won't I just don't know what came over me. And he's laying down all these excuses, right? And that was interesting to me because the first time he does it, he's like apologetic, and he's like, man, I don't know what happened. Like, I blacked out, and all that kind of stuff. That was interesting. But then as the abuse goes on, you don't hear that story. You don't hear him say I'm sorry or whatever. It's just like he just keeps doing it. And Drake's mom just keeps dropping Drake off at Brian Peck's house, and he's allowed to hurt him over and over and over again. And then again, he doesn't go into detail, but he says anything you can think of he was doing, which is pretty gross. You know what I mean? But he's like, anything you can think of that he could do to me, he was doing to me, is how he put it. And so you let your imagination run wild with that if you want. I'm good. That's all I needed.
I don't want to.
Yeah. But so when you were hearing that story, how'd you feel about it?
Oh, yeah, disgusted.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, oh, this guy's doing that to a kid, and he was supposed to make feel safe, and then he just betrayed his trust like that. Extreme sympathy for Drake Bell. Not enough to excuse what he did later in life, but it's like, oh man, that's disgusting. That shouldn't have happened to you.
But another thing too, with regards to what Drake did later, is not a lot of people are familiar with what he did. Because like the people I talked to about it, like even Darcy, but not just her, like a couple of people texted me and were like, what did he do again? And I'm wondering, is that Hollywood again covering? It's not a cover up because they know he did it.
Yeah, it's out there.
But nobody's paying attention to what he actually did. You know what I mean? I keep having to explain it to people. You know?
Think it's because like it's Drake Bell. He's not as big.
Either he's not as big, or they still like him so much that they're overlooking it. And I'll get to this point in episode 4 when we get to it, but I'm building toward it. I keep highlighting this point of people don't know what Drake did. People don't care what Drake did. They're already forgiven him, or blah 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 blah. And I'm bringing this up for a reason. In episode 4, I'll really hit. Hopefully, I'll hit the point the way I want to where it's clicking, right? But anyway, so yeah, he's giving his side of the story. And do you remember how he gets caught? Did Drake tell somebody? No, I remember his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah. Brian called his girlfriend at the time his mom's house phone.
Yeah.
Just to scream at him.
Right. So Drake starts using his now ex-girlfriend, but at the time his girlfriend, he's staying at her house, and he's using that as an excuse to get away from Brian. Well, Brian, missing his secret playtime with Drake, starts blowing. Are you okay? His secret tickle time.
Oh, that's nuts.
Brian Peck's Playhouse. Okay. Drake starts missing those sessions, right? So Brian goes full stalker mode or full clingy, and he's blowing up. I don't think they had cell phones back then like they do now. Like it was definitely the sliding phone. Maybe they had Blackberries by then that had the keyboard on it. Right?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's an answering machine.
Right. At the time.
A straight up landline.
Well, he's calling over there every 30 seconds. And Drake's like, I don't want to talk to him, or I'm busy. And his girlfriend at the time's mom notices, like, hey, Drake, you're being super weird, avoidant with it. She notices that. The other thing she notices is that why is this weird 40-year-old something guy blowing up my phone over a kid? Right. Like, why is he asking where this kid's at? He sounds frantic. He sounds freaky. He sounds like a crazy stalker girlfriend is what he sounds like. But he's trying to get a hold of Drake for no reason. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then Drake's acting weird. He's acting uncomfortable. And the parent, I guess, already familiar with this type of behavior. He's like, hey, I know something's wrong, and I know this is like a really bad thing that's going on. So, the good on this parent for noticing, and 2 doing something about it. I forget what that parent does, but I know that she did something, and she tells people. Then it comes out, and Brian Peck gets arrested, and there's a big trial. They don't get in this really till episode 4. It's really just about the abuse he's going through and how he gets caught. So Drake eventually spills the beans, and now I guess we're getting into episode 4 territory. But they go to trial, and another thing that interests me is he goes into the courtroom. His mom's like apologizing, and then they get Drake's dad back on, and he's like, "Yeah, I called her, and I was like, I told you so. Like I knew it." And he's crying.
Yeah, he says, "I knew it. I knew he was a creep. Thank God he didn't do anything to you, Drake."
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
no.
yeah, absolutely." And his dad breaks down in tears, and it was sad to watch. Like, if I found that that's going on with my kid, I don't know what I'd do. I'd be insane. I'd go crazy. So, so that happens. And then I think we're on episode 4 now. But Brian Peck, he goes into trial. Drake Bell goes into the courtroom. He's still a teenager. And he goes in and it's like there's some family members on his end. His mom's there, his attorney. But on the other side of the courtroom, on Brian Peck's side, is all these famous people.
Right.
People from Boy Meets World, producers, everybody. Everyone writes a letter to the judge. And they're like, give him leniency. He's not like this. You get to this trial. And everyone, like all these actors, actresses, producers, writers are all on Brian Peck's side because he had them all fooled. Now, what I'm willing to bet is that he, again, he laid that foundation to where nobody suspected him. So when all this stuff's coming out, he's like, everyone's like on his side. Everyone's defending him. Like, no, never.
Right.
He would never do that, which sucks. But that's how he set it up. Everyone loved him. They was like, he's great with kids, right? Everyone's writing letters in support. And there were so many letters that said, oh, Drake definitely seduced him or saw his weak. Did you read? Did you catch those?
No, I caught those. And my thought was he seduced a grown man. First off, no.
Right.
The second, like you're still an adult. Like you have the responsibility to say no to this or shut it down.
And that's why I laid it down so thick last episode of like, if someone came at us, we're still supposed to say no. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter if the kids even if Drake was the one who's like, yeah, I want Brian Peck, like I'm gonna seduce him. Even if he was like that, it's still Brian Peck's job to say no as the adult, as a man, right? And so all these people are coming in like, go easy on him. He wouldn't have done it unless he was tempted by this kid, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I was shocked.
Yeah.
And why do you think they would have that position at the time? Well, like, what's going on in people's heads? Now, nowadays, that wouldn't fly. But back then, I was like, people really think this way,
Yeah.
It took women forever to break out of the, well, what were you wearing when you were assaulted? Like, people used to talk like that.
Yeah.
And heck, at one point I was guilty of it too. Like, oh, well, what were they wearing? Like, that's wrong. Doesn't matter what they're wearing. Doesn't mean you're supposed to do anything against their will. You're not supposed to assault them.
Right.
But for a kid, I never would have said that in regards to a child ever.
Absolutely not.
Even when it was acceptable to say that, and it's never acceptable. But even when people said it about women, I never was like, well, what was the kid wearing? The kid was seducing the adult. No. So what? Like, what do you think changed? Like, I don't think there was ever a time period where that was acceptable. So what do you think's going on in these people's heads? These adults, these fully grown adults. What do you think?
Like you said, I think he just had people fooled that much to where he could say, I don't want to say anything, but he could tell everyone, like, I didn't do it, and they just flat out believe him.
Yeah. Right. And that has to be what it is. Like,
that has to be.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's either that or, like, the corruption in Hollywood in general to where they knew about it, and they're just covering for their guy, or he's paying people off, or more intimidation.
Yeah.
It could be a combination of all four things. But it's not right. Like, I just don't see how he didn't get more time.
Yeah.
And how he got so many letters of recommendation, for lack of a better term, because that's like, how do you write a letter for this guy?
Right.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Now, we've seen cases recently, not with kids, where someone who's got major abuse allegations against them, they still have their friends come in and write letters and say, hey, judge, go lenient on him. He's not like that. A big example of that is the Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis. They wrote letters to the other guy from that 70s show. I forget his name, but you know what I'm talking about?
Topher Grace?
No. Let me look it up.
Yeah. I forgot his name.
Right. Let me look it up. Sorry, guys. That's 70s. Cast. What was this dude's name? Danny Masterson.
Yeah.
The big curly-haired, sarcastic dude with the sunglasses. He got in trouble for essay of a bunch of actresses, and he got like 20 years in prison or something crazy. Like, he was guilty. And Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher wrote letters saying, hey, like, we worked with him. He was a really nice guy. They did the same thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't for kids, and they didn't say, oh, the kids wanted it. They didn't do anything like that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so it sounds like no victim blaming on
Right.
their
No.
part.
But people still went up their butts about it. They still held their butts to the fire because they accused them of not supporting victims of SA and all that kind of stuff. And all, so they did a weird apology YouTuber video where they said, "Hey, we do support victims. We're sorry. We didn't mean to say we didn't." And blah 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 blah. In that instance, I'm not mad at them because they were just supporting their friend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And again, I didn't read the letter, but I don't. As far as I know, they didn't say victim blaming, but they were just trying to support their friend, who was already found guilty of several cases. You know, and he was going.
They didn't say he did nothing wrong.
Yeah, and he was gonna go. He was gonna go to prison for pretty much the rest of his life. Okay. Oh, that made me spark something else I want to talk about later too, if we have time. But essentially, so they caught flack for that, but. You come back to back then, and I'm still like, it's a similar situation, but I'm still just like, what is up with these adults? Like, yeah, the kid, you know, it just, that boggles my mind.
Yeah, it's crazy.
A big one though. Now this is a big deal for me. One of the people that did it was Kimmy Robertson. Are you familiar with her?
No.
She plays a very good character in one of my favorite shows of ever, Twin Peaks, of all time. Twin Peaks, right? And she's the one, Drake Bell called her out on Instagram, and he tagged her profile, and he put her picture, and he put the letter she wrote, and he said she wrote the worst letter. Is what, and it was the thing, it was the victim blaming. Well, the kid wanted it. Like he put her on blast. He's like, she wrote the worst letter out of everybody there. Said blaming me, you know, taking his side, saying he wouldn't do that, like all that stuff. He put her on blast so much to the point where she deleted her Instagram because then, you know, once that story came out and she and then again, I guess he was really mad at her because he called her out, put her on blast, like more so than anybody else. Like, and he said like she wrote the worst letter out of everybody. And once that came out, she just straight up deleted her Instagram stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know if she'll ever turn it back on or try to set the record straight or talk about it. I don't know. But I'm curious as to like what he thinks or what she might try to say later at some point.
I don't know. What can she say
later? Right.
It's like, I was just supporting my friend.
And yeah, but like you can't justify you know, the kid was tempting him. You know, you can't.
That's a crazy thing to tell someone.
You can't justify that. And I'm wondering how she'll try to do it in the future because like she has to crawl out of the cave she's hiding in and say something. You know,
I think she'll do the YouTuber apology.
I don't. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But on Instagram, her Instagram story. But yeah, that really hit hard for me. I don't think like I think a little bit less of her now for sure. I don't think I'm not mad at her though. Because I want to know in general, because she wasn't the only one. That's the one thing. She's going to have a hard time. Even if she says, hey, I'm sorry, Drake, I just didn't know any better at the time. It's hard to justify what you say when you say, well, the kid was tempting him. Yeah. So go easy on him. He wouldn't have done that had Drake not tempted him or seduced him. Like, you can't justify that nowadays. No. You can't. And I don't know, when she does come out of the closet, no, bad term. When she comes out of the hole she's hiding in and tries to justify it, I want to know what she's going to try to say. She's going to try to say something. I kind of want to know what it is, you know? Yeah.
It might just be bogus, honestly.
Yeah, right. I'm curious. I'm curious to know. So I'm curious though. So anyway, back to episode 4. So Brian Peck gets sentenced, and I'm gonna connect this to the story I just said about the '70s show guy Danny Masterson. Brian Peck gets sentenced to 16 months. You said 18, maybe it was 18. That's still low. 16.
Yeah,
that's tiny.
For that crime, yeah.
That's horrible, and he was able to work for Disney for a long time after. Okay, but you get people like Danny Masterson, who assaulted fully grown women. Why are people taking women more seriously than kids? And now, granted, it was bad. Like you're not supposed to do that to women. Anyone that doesn't consent, like you do anything to someone without their consent, that's bad. But how come people are getting 40 years for crimes against adults? But when it comes to kids, nothing. Almost 16 months is a slap on the wrist,
right?
And you're still qualified for good time, good behavior, that type of stuff. So why is someone who hurts a woman bad? Again, still bad. But when you hurt a woman, you get 40 years. But when you hurt a kid, you get less than 2 years. That's another thing that I do not understand.
So this the Brian Peck court, all that happened in like the 2000s,
right?
Like I hate to say this, it just doesn't make me feel good at all. But it was a different time. So
Right.
like if the Danny Masterson case happened in the 2000s as well, he probably wouldn't have got as much time because I think we were just more insensitive as a people back then.
A lot of that stuff. Well, I need to look up when Danny Masterson was at large and committing his most of his crimes. Right, I need to look that up. But a lot of that stuff happened years ago that they brought up. So he probably did get caught back then, but only recently did it. Like now that with Me Too coming out, that's what changed everyone's perspective, and was like, oh, we actually need to do something about it and not just pay them off or sweep it under the rug. Me Too is what brought all that to light, and then people started getting held accountable. Because you got people like Harvey Weinstein and probably Danny Masterson and a bunch of other people that were doing it for years with no consequences, decades and no consequences. So only recently with the hashtag Me Too has all that stuff come to light and been pushed.
Right.
I'm hoping the stuff with Nickelodeon pushes this type of crime in a similar direction where now people start taking it really seriously. I really do. I hope this has the same effect as Me Too. But Hollywood still... It's another thing Hollywood's really good at is just throwing kid stuff under the rug. They're not good with adults, adult women assaults. And even then, it probably is a woman thing too, because you got Brendan Fraser who said like, hey, this producer assaulted me decades ago. Nobody's looked into that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, there's still a stigma
right.
for males getting essayed, I guess.
It just doesn't rub me the right way that women are taken more seriously, not just over men, but also over kids.
Yeah.
That's the thing I have a problem with. That women, they're getting justice. They're getting 40 years for their assaulter, or at least 20 plus years. But kids, no. And guys, they're not even taken seriously at all. Right. They're not even looking at it. No investigation, nothing. Brendan Fraser, like, he's not going to see justice. Right. You know what I mean? That doesn't rub me the right way. So now we get to, again, in episode 4, he gets sentenced, light sentence. He gets to work with kids again. So moving on, let me see. What happened after that story-wise? I think he kind of just started talking about how he was dealing with it.
Yeah.
Which he said I wasn't, essentially. And that's totally fair.
Yeah,
like, he just kind of, like, pushed it down.
Mm-hmm.
I want to tie it back to, hopefully I tie this well, with what he did wrong. So we get to the point in the episode where they bring up what Drake Bell did. They talk about his drunk driving. They talk about his drunk driving way more than they talk about his child endangerment.
Yeah.
Here's what rubbed me the wrong way about the documentary is that they swept what Drake did under the rug. They didn't talk about it that much. They just said, yeah, I pled guilty to child endangerment, and then they moved on. So the same way that networks covered Brian Peck and swept under the rug, hid it, or glossed over details, I'm seeing personally the same thing that Brian Peck did, we're doing with Drake Bell.
Right.
Where we don't even talk about what he did, or we move past it, we sweep it under the rug. And I understand to an extent they want to not piss him off so he doesn't want to be in the documentary at all. Mm-hmm. But what does that say to what we were doing the past couple episodes with Dan Schneider? If we piss off Dan, he leaves. If we piss off Drake, he leaves. So where's the line?
Why the documentary didn't go into more detail about the charges against Drake Bell. And my question was, do you think it's more of them not knowing fully what happened because it's been covered up by Hollywood, or is the documentary people, are they trying to cover it up themselves to protect Drake Bell for some reason?
I think it's the second one. I think now part of it could be they don't want to piss him off to where he doesn't want to be in the documentary at all. That might be a condition of the contract. But if that's the case, that's a direct parallel to Dan Schneider, where it's like, we don't want to piss off our golden boy because he'll take all his great ideas and leave.
Right.
That doesn't sit well with me in a way. Now, I understand this was a very big, important story to tell, so I don't blame them if that was the reason. Okay. But that does open the door, at least in my mind, for, well, they're doing the same exact thing Nick did. Which to me, in a way, kind of undermines the whole documentary, because the whole point was like, we're exposing him for all the stuff he did, and we're exposing Nickelodeon for covering it up. But then what are they doing? Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense, at least?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're doing a thing that they did to him.
Exactly. For the sake of the story, maybe. But even then, Nickelodeon said, well, we did it for the sake of our show. It's the same justification in my eyes. And I personally have a problem with that. I think Quiet on Set is very guilty of doing what Nick did back in the day. They didn't have to ream him for it. They didn't have to like press him and make him feel like crap.
Yeah.
But
they could have had him describe what he actually did, what actually happened with that, because apparently he did have a reason behind it, according to Drake.
Yeah. But I very clearly saw behavior and patterns from the crew on this documentary that Nick did for Dan Schneider. Another interesting thing, now moving on from that, I hope that made sense to y'all, and I hope that was a point that I set up previously in the last episode, and now I hope that made sense. But now I want to move on to later in the show. Where was I going with this? The only person that reached out to Drake, oddly enough, and asked him how he was doing and how are you, was Dan Schneider. So the only person that's reaching out to him and trying to see if he's okay, checking his well-being, was Dan. So then it's like I said earlier, this documentary doesn't have as much on Dan as people were hoping. They were hoping this would blow the lid off on what Dan was doing with kids and all this, but I don't know if evidence of that exists, is what I'm saying. I don't think there's enough proof of that going around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I don't think he went that far, personally. Now, was he a bad person on set? Absolutely. Yeah. Was he sexist? Yes. Was he a pig? Absolutely. But I don't think there's enough evidence of him going beyond, hey, he's a little weird or he's a little creepy. I don't think there's enough to go past that as far as like what he did.
Well, I think this is a main point of the documentary. Like, we should still get him out of here because he was a pig.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like part of his behavior made it okay for everyone else, like Brian and Jason, to do the things that they did.
Yeah.
So
now, what was the final straw? I don't remember that got Dan not fired, or was he fired? I don't remember.
Yeah, he was fired.
So do you remember what was the last straw? Because they put up with it forever.
Yeah.
You know.
Was it the whole Sam and Cat situation?
It must have been. That must have been it.
I'm not sure because I think he had a show right after that, and I think that was the last one.
Yeah.
It may have been that people were just tired of working with him because he just got really difficult to work with at the end. Yeah.
Now, I will say, like, he did a lot of good for the network. Like, his shows were consistently hits. He knew what resonated with kids, and he was able to adapt that for teenagers. He knew. Like, he created Zoe 101, all that, Amanda Show, iCarly, Sam and Cat. Like, he took two popular characters from that and gave them their own show, and it was doing great. It was doing so good that when they canceled season 2, everyone was shocked. Everyone was sad. Like, he knew what to do. You know, like, he was very good for the network, but not so good for his workers and for the kids. Like, well, shoot, I want to watch that apology video he did, but it's going to be hard to do without my phone.
Yeah, we use my phone.
Is it iPhone?
Yes. Oh, is that
yeah,
is that a problem?
Yes, it is actually. No, I need to plug it into the soundboard. So, do you have anything else you want to say about the documentary? Then we can go to his apology. What I can do is I can scoot over, have you sit here, and then we'll both watch it, and then I'll edit it later. So we'll both be in one shot, and we'll be reacting to it, and we'll go like that. Do you have anything else about the documentary you want to say?
I'm glad it happened, despite the sketchy stuff with Drake Bell that wasn't addressed.
Right.
I still think it's a net positive.
Yeah.
And hopefully this leads to more people speaking up and the crimes against children being taken more seriously.
Yeah. Let me say for sure, though, episode 5, yes, you were correct. It was very filler. It was very much. They talked to Drake a bit, but it wasn't anything like crazy new. He didn't reunite, and they talked to him over Skype, so he wasn't even on set.
Yeah, I heard it was a reunion show vibe.
But it was like it was 3 side characters from the doc. It wasn't like Drake and Josh and Ariana Grande, Jim McCurdy. No,
like, how are they doing now?
Yeah, they pulled in a guy who was oh shoot, what was it? What were they saying? Where he was like, Yeah, I think Brian also made it pass at me, and I was like, okay, well, do tell me here, and it was something like, no way, like, bro, you're reading too much into that. Get out of here. Get out of here, scamp. you know. But yeah, and the person interviewing wasn't even the same lady doing the documentary. It was just it was some reporter.
Oh, it was a B team.
Yeah, I was like, this isn't even quite on set. Like, this has nothing to do with the rest. Yeah, like you said, very much filler. They really wanted to just capitalize on the success and just we need one more episode so we can get more watching, you know. So pretty lame, you know. Boo. So episode 5 was kind of bad. But all right, we're gonna switch over to the react section of this episode. Give us a minute to set up, guys. But with some creative editing that Shaps is gonna do for us, he'll switch us over in 3, 2, 1. All right, guys, we're back, ready to react to this apology video by Dan Schneider. Do you know this guy's name? The guy that's interviewing him?
No, he didn't. He doesn't say his own name.
Yeah, so he's the guy. What's his character's name from iCarly? The guy on the stick guy.
Boogie.
Boogie. Oh, yeah. There's a guy with all the stuff on a stick. So he's walking around trying to sell everything. Talks with Dan Schneider. We're gonna listen to it right now.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played Tebow on Nickelodeon's iCarly.
Tebow.
I got a chance to watch the Quiet on Set program, and I reached out to Dan to see if it was something that he'd be willing to discuss. I'm pleased to say that he said yes. Dan, how are you?
Is anybody else pleased?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Ugh.
I really
What is that
appreciate you
beard?
reaching out
I don't like it
and
at
giving
all.
me the opportunity to talk to you about what we saw over the last 2 nights.
I'm really glad you're here because I believe this is important.
For sure.
We've got a lot of things to unpack.
Sorry.
But before I dive...
Okay, here's the thing. I always said guys look better as they get older. He looks worse, notably worse.
Like he shouldn't have grown facial hair.
Yeah, or like he should have like trimmed it or sculpted it to where it like doesn't look terrible.
Right.
So
it just looks like he super did it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that guy likes him young.
into my list of topics that I'd like to discuss. Is there anything you'd like to start off with?
Absolutely. Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
Let's talk about the massages.
Okay.
Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing.
It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation. And even additionally, I apologize to the people who were walking around Video Village or wherever they happened, because there were lots of people there who witnessed it who also may have felt uncomfortable. So I owe them an apology as well.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that was okay. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, he still did it, and he's still like, you know, like it was wrong. But I mean, again, it was uncomfortable. It wasn't like professional. It made people feel weird. But like, he didn't like commit a crime. And he said sorry for that part. So I was like, okay, like, I don't know. What do you think?
I say, did he? He harassed women, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm just saying on the massage part, like, you know, all right. Like, that's an okay apology. Like, yeah, he still did it. And it's kind of hard to come back after the fact and you only apologize after it's exposed. Like, there's something to be said about that. Like, otherwise he wouldn't have cared. He wouldn't have said anything.
Yeah.
But
I guess.
Yeah.
It's still weird.
Starting off all right. Could be worse, right? You know. Sorry, the sirens. There's a lot of crime in this area. My goodness. Yeah. But yeah, he's been okay. He's all right.
Dan, talk to me about the writer's room. From what I saw, not cool.
No. And I don't mean to cut you off, but if I can cut right to the chase, let me just say, no writer should ever feel uncomfortable in any writer's room. Ever. Period. The end. No excuses. Most TV writers, comedy writers have been in writers' rooms, and they are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up. But the fact that I participated in that, especially when I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. I shouldn't have done it. And I can tell you why it hurts really bad for me. I remember very clearly my early experiences, my first experiences in the entertainment business. I was green, I was scared, I was excited. It meant the world to me that I was getting those opportunities. And I went in and I got lucky because they were great. My first couple of experiences were fantastic. And the fact that I didn't pay that forward to every employee that walked through my door, it hurts my heart because I should have. And I wish I could go back and fix that. In the writer's room, there's no doubt that sometimes those jokes went beyond the pale, and I said things that went too far or made practical jokes that went too far, and that was wrong. And that was because I was an inexperienced producer. I was immature. Wouldn't happen today, but I'm just really sorry it happened.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry is not good enough to take all the stuff he did back. The making people feel like crap, the pay. Like, is he going to give them back pay for all the work that they did? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry he's not good enough here for that. Like, you screwed people out of money. You were sexist on set. You can't chalk that up to inexperience because he was on every single show. Like, you can't say inexperience when you're Nickelodeon's one-on-one number one guy. Right. You know what I mean? That doesn't work. But what do you think?
So far, it feels a little disingenuous.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we didn't finish it yet, so
yeah,
that's what I'm feeling right now. But maybe he'll turn it around.
Like the massage thing, I can understand. Like, hey, that really was unprofessional. Like, and now that you bring it up and it's like, okay, like maybe, but that, like, you can't just say I'm sorry, especially since you waited till the documentary came out. It's almost like he was waiting to see what he was being accused of before he started apologizing. You know what I mean? Like, okay, what else did I do? You know what I mean? Because he doesn't bring up anything that the documentary doesn't go over. You know what I mean? He only addresses what the documentary says. He could have gone back with some other stuff he knows. If he felt like he did something wrong, he could do some soul searching and be like, okay, here's some other stuff that I didn't take accountability for. I'm not catching those vibes. I'm going to respond to what they brought up.
Yeah, it's very reactionary.
Yeah. So, all right, continuing on.
Now, we know you've had a lot of success over 2 decades. Thousands of people have worked with you, for you. Okay. Let's speak directly to the people who did not have a good experience with you.
Okay, I would like to speak to those people because I hate that anybody worked for me and didn't have a good time. You know me. You've been on my sets. Look, I've had some employees that have worked for me for 10 years, some more than 20 years, who would work with me again, but not everybody. There's still a significant number that didn't have a great time working for me, so my batting average isn't nearly high enough in that area. And the way they wouldn't get the best of me is that I would let the pressure of doing 40 or even more episodes per year, I would let that pressure get to me, which a good boss should never, ever do.
Was there specific things that you were doing?
Sure.
That was very broad. That was like, well, I was overworked. That's not an excuse to treat people like crap. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm getting with that. He's like, well, I did 40 episodes a year. I'm sorry, a year? Maybe 40 episodes, 40 drafts, 40 screenplays a month. Yeah, I could see some cracks in the nut. You know what I'm saying?
So far it's just not landing for me.
Yeah. And he's so broad right now. He's not even being like specific where he's like, hey, the people that I treated like crap, blah, blah, blah. Like now he's just like, well, I was overworked. So, but it's not good. But like, I was overworked. So, that's when they got the not so good sides of me. So cute, Dan. Oh, you little scamp. Tell me more.
Snap at people sometimes. I would be snarky when I could have given them a nicer answer. I would not give people the time that they needed. I would be in too big a hurry to get on to the next thing I had to do. And watching that show, there were so many times I wanted to pick up a phone and call some of those people and say, I'm so sorry and let's talk about it.
But you didn't?
I wish you'd had a better time and I wish I could have shown you a better experience.
Yeah. Now,
so he basically said like nothing. You know what I mean? Yeah. No. I don't know. Again, he basically was very broad. Not getting specific. Like, well, I thought about calling them and saying sorry, but I just didn't do it. I thought I'd just get on here.
I really wanted to.
I thought I'd just get on here with you, Tebow, and just say, sorry to everybody in a blanket, and a blanket apology.
Right.
All right.
So thousands of jokes have been told.
Yeah.
But currently where we are, some people think that some of those jokes are inappropriate for children. What do you think of that?
all these jokes that you're speaking of, that the show covered over the past 2 nights, every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny. Okay? Now we have some adults looking back at them 20 years later through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, oh, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid show. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show, just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it. I want my shows to be popular. I want everyone to like. The more people who like the shows, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So if there's anything in a show that needs to be cut because it's upsetting somebody, let's cut it.
So I think it's big for you to say with
Yeah.
your work.
Okay. So how do you feel about that? Let's cut it. Let's just yeah.
Like, first off, you're gonna have to cut off like half of the shows.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna have to cut out the majority of Victorious. Like, that doesn't solve anything.
No.
They also didn't apologize for it. Like,
Yeah.
he just said these were written for kids. Even the funny shot.
And I just don't buy that because like those are clearly like you said, like those were not for kids. Like I mean,
he was laughing with some of the boys on set.
yeah. And like some of the kids were like, I don't get this joke. You know what I mean? So like for kids, like I don't know. He could have easily. I thought I gave a better justification than he did. Was like, hey, look, all the shows did that, and that sometimes they help with you coming back and being like, as an adult, you go back and rewatch it.
Right.
You're like, oh, okay, I get it now. That was funny, right? But he's sticking with the these were jokes for kids, by kids, for kids. We went the Chuck E. Cheese route, like where a kid can be a kid. You know what I mean? I'm like, look, dude, just own up to it.
Right.
Own up. Look. There's no way. All the Ariana Grande shorts they did. There's no way you can tell me that was for kids.
Yeah,
where she's holding the carrot and she's like, "Oh my goodness," or the mom and daughter are holding shake weights and they're shaking them at their you just can't do that. You can't tell me like, "Oh, those were for kids." Kids didn't get that, So I don't know. Continuing.
If it's viewed as that today, you don't have a problem.
Cut it.
I mean, that's a solution.
The last thing I want to ever do is put any content in a show that's going to upset my audience and make them want to turn off the TV. Why would I ever want to do that?
That makes sense.
You already did.
I want to give you an
Yeah,
opportunity.
that's the thing.
to-
You can't say cut it after the fact.
Yeah.
Like he's already made the money off of it. He's gotten the
been years.
recognition, decades. You know what I mean? And then you're like, oh, just cut it out. You can't just, that fixes everything. You know what I mean? Oh, just, if
The
you cut
damage
it.
has been done, sir.
Yeah. It's like so Brian Peck, like when he got fired, well, it's like, oh, if that's happening, fire him. Well, we fired him, but he still did the thing to the kid.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't take the damage and reverse it back to zero. It's well after, you can't, you know what I mean? You can't just be like, oh, well, then just cut it out. Like, no, you already made the money. You already got your reputation off of it. You got the fame and glory, What good is cutting the DVD copy release 20 years after the fact?
Right.
You know what I mean? So that part I just did not get. That baffled me. So, but what else is he going to say? He has no justification. He just says, well, just cut it out now.
kind of elaborate on something.
Okay.
The thought process from the series is you had the power to just write a joke, and no matter what, it's going on TV. You just had that type of power. Is that true?
The notion that I had the power to just produce whatever I wanted and have it air is completely false.
Okay.
There were many, many levels of scrutiny. Okay? We had executives in LA. We had executives in New York.
So two coasts.
Two coasts
Okay.
of
Both
approval, yes. And by the way, approval at every stage, really.
Okay.
And I'm talking about wardrobe. I'm talking about makeup, sound, sets, dialogue, jokes, everything.
Now, when you say approval, these obviously that's a hierarchy, not your colleagues or
right.
people in the room. Okay.
No, not my colleague. No, these are my bosses. Bosses, and then their bosses, and then their bosses. And they're approving all of this stuff.
Okay.
Okay? And we're also shooting it in front of all sorts of adults and caregivers and the set teacher and the families. Everybody's watching it. And if anybody had said anything, hey, we don't like that, that's not appropriate, then it would have been cut out.
Now, I'm gonna push back a little.
So on that's more of a he said, she said type thing. Like we don't have proof either way, I don't think,
Right.
unless I missed something in the documentary. The documentary claims that he had all the power, and if they told him no, that he would walk and they would lose their golden boy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a credible thing to say, but also it's credible to hide. He can hide behind it because he said they all approved it.
Right.
So that maybe they were scared that they'd lose him by not approving it, but at the end of the day, they approved it. So it's like that the fault is on them.
It didn't really change anything.
Right.
And also, the executives above him should be getting a little crap for this as well. 'Cause
Yeah.
they did ultimately allow this.
That was very glossed over too, wasn't it? The Nickelodeon executives, because all their statements were, over the years we've they put this at the end of every episode. Over the years we've adopted many practices that are designed to keep kids safe. Like that's their official statement. So if we're allowed to, if we listen to them and take the fifth right on the record, and it's like, well, what do we can assume that they weren't paying attention like they should have. They let Dan Schneider do whatever he wanted.
Right.
But there is a built-in defense for him where he said, look, they approved it. The jokes were in there, and they said, sure. So it's like, at this point, I'm going to have to be with him on this. It's Nickelodeon's fault for not, for letting these get approved.
Well, that sounds crazy, too. It's like, they should have stopped me. It's like, what?
Right.
Like, no, you're not off the hook here, buddy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. If it was so bad, how come they didn't stop me? Yeah, that's a good point.
Because the series painted you in this way that you were just the guy that was doing what he wanted. And people were afraid to confront you about things. So just humor me, say that was the case. What would have been the ultimate way to...
Okay. If nobody on the set, if all of the dozens and dozens of adults that were on the set, if they didn't say anything, if my bosses said, if they insisted, you got to make a change here, you got to cut that, I had to do it. I had no choice.
Got it. Now this next one, it kind of hit close to home.
I don't know about that one, Chief.
Being a new father.
And it's basically what you just said. Like, just because they're not saying anything doesn't mean you can do what you want. He didn't address whether or not they were scared of him. He said if they told me to cut it, I would have had to cut it, and that's true. But what everyone's saying is nobody told you because they were scared you'd leave,
right?
And he's not addressing that, so gets thrown by the wayside.
I wouldn't be opposed to my child being in the entertainment industry. It doesn't matter what age, yeah? Seeing some of those on-air dares, seeing it now from where you are now in your life, what do you think of that?
I think that some of the on-air dares went too far. I think they pushed the envelope too far. Not all of them, not most of them, but some did. Nickelodeon wanted to do their version of Fear Factor. At the time we were shooting all that, so I was tasked with doing these on-air dares with the All That cast. So we get with the writers and we come up with all these ideas, and it's hard to do because we don't have the budget of Fear Factor, and we can't put the kids in dangerous situations like the adults are put in. So it was hard to come up with stuff. But we would come up with all these ideas of dares they could do. We would give them to the network, and they would say, tell us the ones that were okay.
Right.
Those are the ones we shot. Those are the ones that aired. At the time, I had no indication that any kid ever had a problem with them. But when I was watching the show over the past 2 nights, I now know that there were kids who did have problems with the on-air dares. And it breaks my heart. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry to any kid who ever had to do a dare or anything that they didn't want to do or weren't comfortable doing. We went out of our way to make sure they were safe and that everything was done properly. But if a kid was scared and didn't want to do it, kids shouldn't have had to do it. Yeah. Period, the end. Right. And if I had known at the time, I would have changed it on the spot.
I can sympathize with him on that. Yeah. Like, I mean, like I said, there were some things in the earlier part of the first episode I was like, like, that's borderline. Like, I can understand maybe now you're upset about it, but back then, like, I don't think it was that crazy of a stretch to think, like, this is a funny, on paper, like, this is a funny sketch. Mm-hmm. And then, like, afterwards, the kid's like, hey, that was actually uncomfortable. It's like, what are you going to tell me now? Tell me way after the fact. Like, we shot it, I understand where he's coming from on that front, where it's like, now, if they said they didn't like it, would he have actually changed it? That's
my thing. I don't know if he would have actually changed it.
Right, because if we're going off the rest of the documentary said if you fought back against Dan, you were fired.
Right.
So would he have actually changed it? Probably not. Like, no. I don't agree with him on that. I think he's full of crap.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't have cut that dog scene.
Right. Right. But that's not a bad answer, is what I'm saying. But, like, I don't think, if we're to lead to believe that he is a big jerk that he is, then he probably wouldn't have cut it. I think he's probably lying about that. Maybe he does feel bad in hindsight, but it doesn't change what he did back then and how he treated people.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. So I don't think that was a bad response, though. It was like, hey, you know, we had a lot of stuff we had to work around. We had to work around these are kids, not adults, but they also want a Fear Factor type show. Nobody said anything at the time, so I think we're okay. But when I was watching it and I was like, oh shoot, I didn't know they felt uncomfortable. That's not a bad response. So like, good enough, Dan. Sure. You've moved your pawn forward in this long game of chess. You have a pawn and a king left, and he moved his pawn out the way.
Now, we also saw the series highlight 2 former writers viewers, 2 women, who spoke about a wage discrepancy.
Let's talk about
now,
that.
I know that you don't divvy out salaries. Talk to me about that part.
Well, you're correct. I have nothing to do with paying writers. I never have. I've never made a writer's deal. And of all the writers I've been in a writer's room with, I never even knew how much most of them were getting paid.
Yeah, but we saw these 2 women who were writers for you sharing one salary. How does that happen?
It's very simple. There's a common practice in television when hiring writers. If you have a spot for a new writer, sometimes you'll go to 2 writers and say, hey, if you 2 new writers for your first job are willing to share a salary, you can both have the job. They have the opportunity to say, yes, that sounds good, or no, no thank you. In this case, it was 2 women writers. I've done another show where that teaming was done with 2 male writers, and they split a salary. I did another show where it was a male and a female writer, and they split a salary. So
And these are all first-time writers.
all first-time writers looking for their first gig.
Got it. Now in the
Okay,
series,
how do you feel about that?
That's BS.
You really?
Baloney.
Okay.
Because one of the women in the documentary, she called, I believe, an HR rep, and she told the HR rep what was going on, and the rep told him, like, no, they can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Yeah.
Also, after that call with the HR rep, Dan Snyder called that woman and just screamed at her, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you trying to turn them against me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I remember
bullcrap.
that. Yeah. Okay.
they also highlighted 2 black actors who said that they felt overlooked. Now, I want to be clear. I'm never going to speak on anyone else's journey. Yeah, I can talk about my experience, how my experience was with you, what I saw prior to working with you. But again, I don't want to speak on anyone's journey. I saw you be honored for diversity in your work.
Yes, and the reason for that is diversity has always been very important to me in my shows. If you go back to the very first Nickelodeon show I ever made, that's very evident, as it is in the second one, and then the first movie I ever made for Nickelodeon, which starred Kenan and Kel, and every show I did after that had a lead black actor in it. I'm very proud of that. It's very important to me. And not only am I proud that they were in my shows, I'm exceptionally proud of the achievements they've had beyond my shows, and they've gone on to bigger and better things, and that gives me a great sense of pride.
Well, something that really
You have
kind
any
of
thoughts
bothered
on that?
me.
This is the thing that I'm most okay with, because he's right. He did put Kenan and Kel on. He's had black people in his shows. I don't want to take away what the black actors and actresses said in the documentary, because I don't want to invalidate how they feel.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. That's fair. I can't speak on that at all. You know what I mean? I'm not black. So, yeah, I was kind of curious what you thought on that. That's not why I brought you on.
Nah. It's like, it's unfortunate. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Right. Because he doesn't feel that way, Tebow. So, real quick, guys, battery died on the camera. So, we'll just film the rest of this with audio only. We can add the video from the interview later. And by me, I mean Shaps. So, all right. Continuing on.
Was how they depicted your relationship with the cast.
Yeah, it bothered me too.
Yeah, just me being there, I knew the dynamic was trust. I understood that in situations where they may have had turmoil, whether it be with their families, whether it be other castmates, they came to you. Versus how they made you look. With that said, Amanda Bynes was brought up in the series and her emancipation and how you were involved in that. Can you talk to us about it a bit?
Sure. Amanda was between the ages of 16 and 17, and she wanted to get emancipated from her parents, which was a fairly common thing with successful young actors, at least at the time.
Sure.
And she wanted that for herself. So she turned to her team, which included her lawyer, her agent, her manager, her publicist, me, because she included me as part of her team, thought of me that way. We supported her. She tried to get emancipated. It ended up not working out. She didn't.
Well, since we're here, let's stay here for a moment. There was also an incident where she had...
First thing he does is, well, it wasn't just me, it was everybody. It was her lawyer, who was also a creepy guy who liked feet. It was, he's just, again, yeah, I was there, but so was that guy, and that guy.
What about him?
Yeah.
Why don't you interview him?
Right. Why is everyone just looking at me? Huh? Huh? All right, Tebow, I'm relying on you. You're asking the hard questions here. Let's get him. Yeah, hit him again.
Ran away from home, if
Yes.
you would. Can you talk to us a little bit just to clear the air of exactly what happened in that situation?
Yes. One night, it was very late, well after midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning. Phone rang. I answered. It was Amanda. She was upset. She was in distress. She had had some conflict with her parents, I think her father, and she called me. I was immediately concerned about her safety.
Oh, of course he was.
I called someone who I knew was fairly nearby. That person was able to go and pick her up. Then I knew she was safe. I felt better. She ended up being taken to the police.
Well, regardless of what some people may think, I think it's only positive that you are there for people when they need you. That said, let's talk about some of the things that have just been swirling forever.
Okay.
You were banned from your set.
Never happened. That is a false rumor.
What happened?
Add it to the list of false rumors.
Talk to me. What happened?
They were adult actresses at the time, and they had their own specific reasons for not wanting to do the show anymore. I'm not judging that. It got tense, and what they don't know, maybe, is I did everything I could to make that show go away. My producer partner at the time, we would call and say, this is not a good situation.
Okay.
So I decided I'm going to do what most showrunners do, which is you're not on the set. There's a director there to shoot it. I'll go up to the writer's room. I'll work on the next script. But because everybody was so used to me caring about every detail of every show so much, for me not to be on the set, maybe some people thought I got banned.
So it was more of an assumption because this guy's usually here and now he's not.
I don't know if it was an assumption. I don't know if somebody thought they were making me look bad by saying I got banned from the set. I have no idea.
Okay.
All I know is I was never banned from the set.
Yep. The darkest part
What
of
do you
the
think?
series.
Do producers and show writers get banned from the set? Is that a thing?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure. I've heard stories. The guy that directed Alien 3, I think it's David Fincher. He got kicked out of the editing room for Alien 3, so it wasn't even his movie. Like a lot of people get mistreated, directors and stuff like that. But I don't know if that applies to his case because of how, again, everyone's scared to tell him off.
Right.
But it wasn't until things started to get more public that's when, like, okay, we actually can't let him do what he wants anymore. Again, they glossed over it in the documentary. This was all it was all kind of speculation at that point.
Right.
They didn't have anybody on who could attest to it and actually like, yeah, he was fired or he's banned from it. Yeah, banned from his own set. Like nobody could really speak on that. So, we're back to he said, she said type stuff. So I don't know. We'll see.
Discuss child predators.
Yeah.
Now, I want to make sure that we clear a couple of things up.
Okay?
Brian Peck was not hired by you.
No, I did not hire Brian Peck.
Of course.
This was a Tolan Robbins production?
Oh,
Yeah.
name dropping.
And when Drake and I talked and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. And I told him, I'm here for you. What do you need? Which Drake mentioned in the show that we watched last night.
Yeah, highlight the good stuff, Dan.
Next,
Highlight what you did
I
good.
heard that he went to court when this guy was being tried, Peck. And when Drake walked in, he saw 50 people sitting on the side of the courtroom supporting Peck. A lot of them pretty famous. Of course, Drake was devastated that happened. And even more disappointing, 41 of those people wrote letters for Peck, character letters, praising him for who he was and asking for leniency. And they knew that he was guilty. They knew he had confessed to some degree. And they still did this.
So we're back to everyone else did wrong in this except me. I'm the only good one here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like, well, Despite what people say about me, I'm not as bad as those guys who, supported Peck. I didn't hire him, though, either. That was Tim Robbins did that, not me.
Right.
So more deflection.
That's baffling that adults would do that.
Yeah.
And
I agree. Those sick people.
I don't know if people know
Not
this,
you, Dan. You're a hero.
but Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with
Yeah, I
this day,
banged her.
she came to me at the time and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are.
I'm sorry, he made that up. She said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you. After he just floundered what he was trying to say.
Right.
She definitely said that.
Would you help me
Oh, no.
with my speech with the judge?
Oh,
And I said, of course. And I did. And he ended up going to prison and serving his time.
oh my God.
Oh, no.
I got one question for you, Dan. Where were these tears when you were beating up people on set?
Right.
Or you were yelling at them and chewing them out and treating them like crap and firing them and cutting their salaries? Where were these tears then, buddy? That's my question to you. Why are you choosing to cry now on camera and not shed a tear and stopping your behavior?
Right.
I think that's a fair question to ask. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm crazy, but all right, we're almost done. Got like 3 minutes.
And yeah, that was probably the darkest part of my career.
Oh, really?
And
That?
here's the kicker that I really don't
There's
get.
more?
After he got out of prison and was, to my knowledge, a registered sex offender,
Why
he
you
was
say it
hired
like
on a
that?
Disney Channel show. I don't understand that.
Is he doing a podcast right now? Because like he's saying what we're saying.
Right.
Well, how'd he get hired on at Disney? You swear he's doing his own like. I got a question for you. How'd that happen? I'm sorry. Is he on our show? Oh, I mean he is.
How
but
did it happen, Tebow?
Yeah.
You tell me,
Yeah.
Tebow.
Yeah. He kind of looks like me too. Oh.
No.
Okay, thanks. I'm
never-
sad for a second.
I don't understand.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, man. Are you okay? You want to take a minute?
Yeah, I'm all right. Let's keep going.
Yeah?
Sorry.
Okay. I think we really unpacked some important things. We set the record straight on a lot of things. Before I let you get out of here, I appreciate the vulnerability that you use
Oh,
and
me
knowing
too.
that there's definitely things that you
You're a sweet guy.
would have and should have done differently. Is there anything that we haven't discussed? Anything that if you could go back and navigate the journey differently, what would that look like?
Yeah, there's definitely things that I would do differently.
Oh, those tears dried up quick.
One that I think would be really, really important is when you're hiring young actors, minors, to work in television, I would suggest that we have a licensed therapist there to oversee that process for the specific reason of making sure that those kids really wanted to do this job, that they really wanted to be on television. Maybe they should even be informed about what that means. What's it going to mean if you're famous? What's that going to mean on social media? What's it going to mean within your family? Let them find out. And then that way, if a kid doesn't want to be on a TV show, they can opt out. That psychologist, that therapist could come to us and say, this kid doesn't want to do it, or their parents aren't understanding of what's going to come. And then we could avoid the mistake of ever putting a kid in a TV show that didn't want to be there. And additionally, the main thing that I would change is how I treat people and everyone. I definitely at times didn't give people the best of me. I didn't show enough patience. I could be cocky and definitely overambitious.
Say cookie?
And sometimes just straight
Oh
up
my God,
rude
Dan.
and obnoxious. And I am so sorry that I ever was. And all right, when I watched the show, I could see the hurt in some people's eyes, and it made me feel awful and regretful and sorry. I wish I could go back, especially to those earlier years of my career, and bring the growth and the experience that I have now and just do a better job and never, ever feel like it was okay to be an asshole to anyone ever. Look, I wanted to make funny TV shows for kids, and we definitely did that. But if I could go back, I would get it done in different ways. I'd just be nicer as often as possible and listen more to the people on my team. And I would do everything that I could to make sure that everyone had a good experience. That's what I do differently.
Dan, I appreciate
Sorry,
your
I
time.
was starting to zone out at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, maybe he does. I'll give him some benefit, and I'm reaching here. Let me be honest with you. This isn't like me. Maybe he is sorry. Maybe. Like maybe he watched it and he's like, okay, it was like a wake up moment for him. He's like, maybe I was a jerk to some people. Okay, like maybe. But again, I'm sorry doesn't cut it. When you stepped on so many people, when you hurt so many people, and you're allowing a lot of stuff to go on under your nose, under your thumb, whatever. Just I'm sorry. It doesn't take back all the tears, all the hurt people went through under your care, a lot of the shady stuff you did, the harassment, the sexism, you know. It's too little, too late. Especially when you're doing a lot of deflection.
Right.
When you're throwing it all in other people, when you're not taking responsibility, you're saying, well, they signed off on it, they let me do it, so it's fine.
Right.
But I'm sorry. Like I can't accept your I'm sorry. And it's not me who can't accept their I'm sorry. Like I wasn't the one hurt.
Right.
I'm just watching this from the outside and talking about it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people that were in the show would agree with me. Like, I'm sorry, he's just not going to cut it. You know, like he hurt a lot of people, and he's only apologizing because the show came out and people are calling him out for it.
Right.
If this never came out, he wouldn't be saying anything, and he would have gotten away with it. No issues. You know what I mean? So, anyway, I think that's all I got to say about that. Unless you got something else you want to add, feel free.
Yeah, it still just came off as disingenuous. Like I get it. In an apology video, you're supposed to say I'm sorry, but
Right.
I just never felt like he was sorry. And just the interview in question was the questions were milk toast to me, like very softball questions, like easy to answer, easy for him to be vague.
And I was like, Dan probably asked him to do it, and he had these questions pre-printed and blah 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 blah, and like he probably highlighted on the script, hey, press here a little bit more, act like you're not taking my answer,
Right?
You know.
Yeah.
So
it'd come off a bit better if he wasn't using his people to do the interview at his house. But yeah,
and he even couldn't, like, the interviewer, Tebow, guy who played Tebow, was like, well, I can't speak to everyone else, but I had a good experience with it. So he picked someone who had a good experience with him.
Yeah.
He picked someone that liked him. He didn't pick, you know, I don't know. I'm not saying he had to pull Drake in and talk to him, but somebody who was a little bit more or less biased.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, like you said. Anything else?
Nah, that's it, brother.
All right, cool, guys. A little bit longer of an episode, but I think that about does it. That's about 1 month's worth of material. So, sounds good to me, guys. Thanks, Toomy, for hopping on. I hope you enjoyed your time.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Next time I do this, can we do something happier, please?
Yes, we can. We'll get you on. We'll talk about video games. Talk about
Tony Hawk.
Yeah, we'll talk about the self-delete squad unalives the Justice League. We'll get you on there for that. Have a great, good old goofy time, unlike the people playing that game.
Right.
Well, guys, thanks for hopping on with us. Hopefully you stayed through with here to the end. Thank you, Shaps, for editing this and making my life easier. Hope to see y'all next time when I do something really cool. I don't know. Yeah. All right. Love you guys. See y'all soon. Bye.